Around a campfire with another kindred spirit, Emile Hirsch's character paraphrases the words of Thoreau. Rather than love, than money, than faith, than fame, than fairness, give me truth. This is Trendset of the Mind, and that's Argos. Today we're going to be talking about the movie Into the Wild. What is life about? Are we meant to spend our youth inside of indoctrination camps, schools, study facts until we can pass standardized tests so we may be categorized into further education, and then carry out a monotonous career or repetitive profession and convince ourselves we're happy all the way until retirement because we see everyone around us doing the same tedious thing? Or would you say it is more conducive for the decency of a human being to fall in and out of love, meet new people, be exposed to a range of ideas, explore nature, go to different cities, experience the greatest of triumphs and the lowest pits of humility? Wouldn't that help us connect better with one another if we were allowed to do the cliche thing of finding ourselves? And there always be an eye roll in the audience for that one. Instead, we try to fit into a mind-numbing system where some have much and others very little, where the goal is to find a comfy job, settle down with the one, and lose our individuality while trying not to appear too weird. What the man in this story is unafraid to do is wander into the unknown, to be okay with not always being cautious and letting life rattle his cage a bit. He dives into the dark depths of the ocean, tests his strength against the waves, and breathes in the salty air while the sun tans his skin. He is not part of the domesticated hordes that have been conditioned to flow with the current. He is a searcher that separates himself from the throngs that waste away in their enclosures in the zoo that is the establishment. While his life may be hard to understand to most, that is because we have been trained to be content with a fool's paradise. It's the barrier that the elites have set for us common folk. You know how most parents and grandparents are always referring to the past? When I was your age, I had to walk through a blizzard for miles just to get to school. Or, when I was younger, the newspaper only cost a quarter. I'm sure you can recall plenty of those kinds of phrases. Now, what if you could look back and say, you had to have mass education where everyone learned the same thing in the same way? Or, you had to work for money even though it has no intrinsic value? As one of my favorite Greek philosophers once said, the unexamined life is not worth living. We don't have to accept things the way they are and think no other way is possible. We don't have to live by pre-designed standards of normal. About 200 years ago, it was pretty common for slavery to exist, that people could own, buy, trade other humans, and slavery still exists, by the way, in many forms. But now when we look back on that, we're like, how could people have not seen that it was so wrong? Or with the Industrial Revolution, when people were working 14, 16-hour days in the mills and the factories, and here we have, if we look back on that time, plenty of empathy, like how could people have gone through that and call that life? And how would you feel if centuries from now people look back on us and they're like, man, how could people have lived with so many limitations and gone through capitalism and been okay with it? Like, how could they have thought themselves happy with that? Here we earn a living, we're told to earn a living, which usually just means you suffer a very slow death because we've become so disconnected from our work. Ancient man, or even more recently until this past century, or the 20th century, 21st century, most people would till the soil, would plant the seeds, would reap the harvest, or people would go out into the wilderness hunting, fishing, uh, getting the fruit of their labor. And now today, you have a customer service job, or uh, you're in some tiny cubicle, or you're behind a computer and answering phones all day, and then 2 weeks go by and you get a little piece of paper, a paycheck that says, okay, here's value. Like, we've it just doesn't make any sense. That And I feel like if we were to return to nature, we wouldn't have all this anxiety and stress and pressure all the time. And the reason why that happened is because we keep following these arbitrary systems where someone is always making choices for our lives. If you think 8-hour workdays are fine and working 5 days a week is okay, let's take a look at what you are actually working for: the Federal Reserve and the elites. And I've mentioned in the past how we pretty much still are working in feudal times, where a majority of us are the peasants just slaving away for the lords. And I'll definitely go into that in future episodes. But as it relates to this video, all money is created out of debt, since the government can only get more by exchanging treasury bonds for Federal Reserve notes. And if you look at the top of any cash you may handle, it says Federal Reserve note, because that just shows it is borrowed money. This requires the government to pay back the money, except this time with compound interest. So not only does the rate of inflation increase every time more cash is made, but a paradox begins to materialize as the interest also increases. Because the money asked for by the government equals what the Federal Reserve gives in return, where does the money come from to pay off the interest made from the borrowed money? Nowhere. Nowhere. There simply is nothing more in circulation to pay off this extra money. So the only alternative to keep everything running is to create more money, which creates even more debt, which means you and I have to pay more for everything. You can watch the attached videos, and especially I would look back when I covered The Matrix, where it went over the history of the Federal Reserve, and it especially goes into things like fractional reserve lending and what a scam that is, because all of this is owned by a few select individuals, privately owned banks that take advantage of us, the general public. So it is, like you've probably heard, the 1%, the elites, use 99% of us. Essentially, the cycle is perpetuated to keep nations and their peoples in a grave of everlasting debt. To empty fiat money, society is made to submit. And I would say this is stupid, because it is, that we believe in this thing. But if you saw my last episode on Inception, they've pretty much built up dream layers where it's ingenious how much we believe in these systems that hold nothing of truth to them, where all they do is type in ones and zeros, and they just bring these things out of thin air, and then all of a sudden you're assigned wealth or you're assigned poverty, and there is no change, there is no cash that is moving from one vault to another. It's just, okay, magic has just happened, and that is what our whole system revolves around, what people slave and save up for: money. We are living in a modern form of serfdom that will never be able to pay off everything, because that is the only thing that keeps capitalism running. If everyone was debt-free and all debts were paid off, there would be no money left, except, of course, for the growing pool of fake money which appears from interest. In this manner, the central banking system ensures that we, the people, will always owe them. Therefore, they will always rule over us. They initiate and terminate every boom-bust cycle, all the Great Depression eras, by lowering the interest rates so that more money will be in circulation and people will take out more loans. Then they increase the rates again when they want to ensure money ends up back in their hands, which causes entrepreneurs, families, small expanding businesses to file for bankruptcy. They can do this for eternity and amass more riches and create a larger poor population, or until they are ready to move into the next phase, which I've talked about. This whole thing is anything but democratic, especially how it fits into government, and we're led to believe it's an illusion that government and corporations are always at odds and they're restricting each other, when really they work hand in hand, because at the very top, just like the media, it's all controlled by the same few people. So for example, if someone's running for office, they're holding an election campaign, and they need more popularity, they need more funding, whatever it might be. Then they go to these companies that say, okay, we'll give you this favor, but if we scratch your back, you have to scratch our back. And so what ends up happening is they'll say, when you get all this power and extra control and whatever, because we put you in that position, then you have to make it so if, for example, we were to create a very toxic product that we're going to sell to the public, but we want to make sure it's kept out of the mainstream media, and we want to make sure there's never lawsuits filed against us, then you, as president or prime minister or whatever, have to make sure that that never happens to us. You have to remember where you came from. And so they do the same thing all the time. They rig the stock markets to make people think, oh, I'm doing so well, or the next minute, okay, you're in debt. And they pre-select years ahead of time who's going to be the next president, governor, prime minister, in accordance with how it plays into the elite grand scheme of how they want history to move forward. So the really despicable thing is that the Federal Reserve is not federal, and it has no reserves, and your mind should just blow right there that it's just one of the many things, one of the many deceptions that we play into every day, and we see all the time when we handle the worthless money that they give us in our daily routines. It just proves that they don't even think twice when it comes to swindling cash from your pocket in any way that they can. So the accompanying documentaries today, there's 3 of them, 3 separate sources, not just the news, like I always say, just the one source owned by government. The first one is given to us by Truthstream Media. It's called It's Time to Revisit the Truman Show. And like how I talked about in Inception, they build the worlds, these fake, false realities that we're meant to live by. Oh, money is so precious, or authority exists. We have to listen to it. We have to obey and comply. And when you watch it, you'll just see how all the things that they program into us, all these calculations that they input to make a population do what it wants. And that's why I love nature so much, because then you're apart from it, and you really can just find yourself, see what is true, what is false, and you don't have all these things bombarding you all the time. The next one is Everything Wrong with the System, Educate Yourself, and it's given to us by the YouTuber What I've Learned, and he has quite a bit of good stuff, but especially this one I like because just like in my last book, which hopefully will be out next year, I'm just going to break apart all these things that we've been led to believe. Oh, what is cool, or what is gross, that's yucky, all these things that pretty much make up our mind, our imagination, all of our thoughts have been conditioned into us. And the last one is Zeitgeist. It came out a long time ago, and I know some people think the religion part has been debunked. I'll let you take what you want from that, but overall I think it's pretty accurate, especially when it talks about how the whole world is a stage, and it goes into the Federal Reserve. So if you don't believe me, watch this one, and if anything else, it should broaden your mind so you can at least see that the world, it's plausible for things to exist in another way. And the recommended reading for today, which I talked about in the last video, is The Prince by Machiavelli, and a very old work, but still has plenty of value, and it just shows how rulers have, depending on the circumstance, they know how to handle people